I would say it probably is the play that has probably had more books written about it in the history of world theater. There is an undeniable fascination with this play, and I don't think that I am going to be able to plumb the depths of why this is in a mere 90 minutes. It's truly a phenomenon, and I think that most people in attending this session have some experience seeing Hamlet or reading Hamlet, and I think that the play, not just the play itself, but its various parts, its phrases, its words, have entered the English language. It's had a tremendous effect on the way we use English in our modern day. And I would suspect that each of you could probably have a favorite phrase or quote from Hamlet, and we wouldn't necessarily repeat ourselves. In Bartlett's book of quotations, there's a large section dealing with Shakespeare, as I mentioned before, and I think that more entries are in that book regarding the play Hamlet than any of Shakespeare's other pieces. So I think that kind of centrality in terms of what is still being used in the language from this play is astonishing. If I may, maybe get a few people to unmute themselves. If anyone would like to contribute a little piece of language that's in this play, something that is, part of our living language arsenal today, I think that would be kind of interesting. So would anyone like to contribute a piece from Hamlet, a little shard of language that we all know and could all recognize?
Well, of course, I have something. My mother,
okay.
Even though I'm from South Buffalo, my mother always quoted a lot of Shakespeare. And one of the things she used to emphasize to us was, neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan off loses both itself and friend. And borrowing is of husbandry is the.
Okay. But we all recognize that phrase, neither a borrower nor a lender be. So that's part of the Polonius's advice to his son Laertes in the play. And we'll why don't I read it? Because within that speech, there's a load of other phrases that have come into the language. It has a particular practical function in the play. His son Laertes is going off to France, to Paris, and it's like the country boy going off to the big city. Polonius wants to arm his son with the protective devices that are going to see him well, in that big metropolis. So let's listen to this speech. I wasn't intending to start with this, but as long as you bring it up, and let's look for those little phrases that have become the common coin of the English language. So this is what he has to say to his son Laertes. Okay, and these few precepts in thy memory, look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them unto thy soul with hoops of steel, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged courage. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. And they in France of the best rank and station are of the most select and generous chief in that. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the day, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. What a great speech. I mean, he could have just retired after writing that speech and people would remember Shakespeare. But it works beautifully within the context of the play. So that certainly is a great treasure trove of memorable phrases. Any other spots in Hamlet that come immediately to mind? And I have Bartlett's in my lap. I'll produce a few if any of you are bereft of that in your memory.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. Can you hear me? It's
Yes,
Ruth?
yes.
Okay, to thine own self be true was part of my valedictory speech back in 1949, so I've never forgotten those words.
Yes, I'm sure that phrase has been recalled at numerous graduation ceremonies. It just seems that Shakespeare coined it specifically for that purpose. Yeah. So I mean, these phrases in this speech have become truisms, and I think they're truisms because they're true. Right. They still apply 400 years later. So, anyways, any other?
Yes, Michael, it's Frank.
Hello.
You probably can't see me, Harry.
I can see you now.
Okay. I always find it interesting when people say, "Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well." That word "well" is not in there in the play.
Yes.
He's talking to Horatio, and it has nothing to. It's just not there. But
yes.
But everybody uses that. I know that.
Yeah, I mean that's a wonderful moment in this play as well. Let me. This is in the
It's
fifth
at the end.
act, and what's interesting about this fifth act is that this gravedigger that Hamlet is in conversation with in this play. I think that maybe Hamlet asks him how long you've been in this profession, and the gravedigger says, why it was about the same time when young Hamlet was born, and he says it's like about 30 years ago. 30 years. So that means that Hamlet would be 30 years in this scene in the play. Well, I think when the play starts, he doesn't appear to be a 30-year-old. He seems to be someone much younger. Mm-hmm. And critics have mused about this inconsistency and wonder, well, how does Hamlet jump from this age in Act 1 to 30 years in Act 5? It's one of those little mysteries that people are still worrying about. Anyway, this is that statement in this play in which Hamlet is at this grave site, and he says to his friend Horatio, after he asks about this particular skull that's set aside by this grave, and the clown says that this same skull, sir, was Sir Yorick's skull, the king's jester. And this is what he says: "Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He hath bore me on his back 1,000 times, and now how abhorred in my imagination it is. My gorge rises at it. Here hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how oft. Where be your jibes now, your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set the table on a roar? Not one now to mock your own grinning, quite chapfallen. Now get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick, to this favor she must come. Make her laugh at that. Prithee, Horatio, tell me, oh, and then it goes on from there. So yeah, so originally it was alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. So I guess maybe simply for people to take that out of the play, out of context, that to make no sense to have Horatio in there, and they decided to end it differently as you say it. But yes, that's become the common coin of the language, and actually Bartlett, by all rights, should have it in there like that, you know, even though it's not precisely Shakespeare. It's still what people say. So it's like folklore, you know, folklore changes over time from person to person. And just because of the, you know, the nature of collective memory, sometimes it alters over time. And that's certainly what has happened with that phrase. So, but that's a very interesting observation. Well, let me offer a couple more phrases just to get your just to get your memory going here. In fact, there's one phrase that I didn't realize it came from Hamlet. The memory be green. You know, I mean, that's definitely so much for him. I mean, I never thought of that as a Shakespearean phrase, but so much for him. That's in Act 1, Scene 2. This is something that Hamlet says, a little more than kin and less than kind. I mean, it's a play on words on part of Hamlet. And in that same scene, Hamlet says, seems, madam? Nay, it is, I know not seems. You know, the notion that, you know, there it either is or it isn't, but there's no such thing as seems. This is something that Hamlet says in that same scene. Frailty, thy name is woman. Sorry, ladies out there. It's not his words, not mine. But that's something you hear a lot, whether correct or not. You hear that. It is not, nor it cannot come to good. That's definitely a little maxim, I'd say. And of course, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Murder most foul. I mean, I think that's the name of a mystery title. I don't know if it's an Agatha Christie or another mystery writer. Murder most foul. Oh, Hamlet, what a falling off was there. I mean, that expression, what a falling off. That certainly is a phrase that people use. The time is out of joint. Oh, cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right. Here's a Polonius quote, brevity is the soul of wit. And he says it in a context where he's being anything but brief.
Yeah, that's true.
Get thee to a nunnery. Use every man after his desert, and two would escape whipping. The play, I remember, pleased not the million. 'Twas caviar to the general. That phrase, caviar to the general, that's certainly something people still describe. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. I will speak daggers to her, but use none. Oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven. I must be cruel, only to be kind. When sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. There's rosemary, that's for remembrance. And there is pansies, that's for thoughts. Let Hercules himself do what he may. The cat will mew and dog will have his day. There's a divinity that shapes our ends. Rough hew them how we will.
Okay.
Not a whit, we defy augury. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. A hit, a very palpable hit. And last but not least, the rest is silence. Hamlet's last words, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of great phrases in this play that people still use. Sweets to the sweet, that's another one. I mean, Hamlet has definitely shaped our language. But in terms of, the constant fascination of this play for people for over 400 years, I think a lot of it has to do with this central figure, Hamlet. There's something about this guy that people have not completely plumbed the depths of. We're still arguing about what makes Hamlet tick after all these years. And there's one speech in particular, or one scene in particular I want to tell you about that I think is the core to this phenomenon. Now, this is a scene in which Hamlet is speaking with his college friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And this is after they've had this performance of this play within the play, The Mousetrap. And Hamlet asks the players for some recorders, for some music. And he needs, and Hamlet is very suspicious of his friends, why they're there. He thinks that perhaps they're spies, that the king has sent them to spy on him. And he, so he asks about, he asks one of them to play one of these recorders. So he says to Guildenstern, will you play upon this pipe? And Guildenstern says, my lord, I cannot. Hamlet says, I pray you. And Guildenstern says, believe me, I cannot. And Hamlet says, I do beseech you. And he says, I know not the touch of it, my lord. And Hamlet says, it is as easy as lying. Govern these ventages with your fingers and thumb, give it breath with your mouth, and it will discourse most eloquent music. Look you, these are the stops. And Guildenstern says, but these cannot I command to any utterance of harmony. I have not the skill. And then Hamlet has this speech. Why? Look you now, how unworthy a thing you make of me. You would play upon me. You would seem to know my stops. You would pluck out the heart of my mystery. You would sound me from my lowest note to the top of my compass. And there is much music, excellent voice in this little organ. Yet cannot you make it speak. It's blood. Do you think I am easier to be played on than a pipe? Call me what instrument you will. Though you can fret me, you cannot play upon me. So I think that those words of Hamlet have resounded down the decades and centuries. He's saying to audiences and critics and actors trying to play him, well, you think you can fret me? You think you can play upon me? Think again. you would pluck out the heart of my mystery. That's what we've been trying to do all these years, pluck the mystery out of Hamlet. And we still throw up our hands in frustration that we can't quite do that. He is an enigma. And so there is this everlasting fascination with Hamlet, the character. And, and also I think, there's a fascination and perhaps mystery about what kind of a play is this play, Hamlet? It seems like that Shakespeare, like with, I think, The Tempest and such, he's kind of mixed a bunch of genres together. It's not quite the same as maybe Polonius's tragical, comical, historical, pastoral kind of mishmash, but it does seem to be a bit of a mix of things. There are so many different ways you could describe the events and story of Hamlet. I mean, for example, a lot of people would say that Hamlet is a great ghost story. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, there is a ghost in Hamlet. Anyone who would like to expostulate on the role that the ghost plays in Hamlet? What does the ghost do in this story?
Deus ex machina.
I'm sorry, I think I heard something.
Is he the Deus ex machina?
I wouldn't say he's the Deus ex machina. Some people might call him the Diabolus ex machina, perhaps. Deus ex machina is usually this deity who ties up all the loose ends at the end of a drama. And there are certainly a lot of plays and operas that have that kind of a figure. I would say that the ghost is kind of like the fuse that is lit for this series of explosions in the play. He's sort of the person who gets the plot going in a way. So what happens in this play in which the ghost has such a primary role?
He drives Hamlet to the sticking point.
I'm sorry?
He drives Hamlet to the sticking point.
Okay. How does he do that?
He makes him desire for vengeance, for vengeance against the speed at which he was supposedly deposed. Okay. So this is a ghost crying out for vengeance, and the question that a lot of people have is this a real ghost? Is this just a figment of Hamlet's imagination, or is it a real psychic extrasensory phenomenon? So that's something that people have batted around for a while. Of course, in the first scene, there are witnesses. There are these guardsmen on the battlements of the castle in Elsinore that see this phenomenon at night while they're on their watch. And then there's this school friend of Hamlet's, Horatio, who they confide in. And Horatio, on that very night, he sees it as well. And they feel that it is incumbent that Hamlet, the younger, is informed about this. So the audience is given the impression that this can't be simply Hamlet's hallucination. That this is definitely something real and something that needs to be further investigated. And they think that if anyone is able to do it, it should be Hamlet, someone who is so close in spirit to this spirit. So that's a very important sort of ignition for this story. And by the way, there is no ghost in the original telling of the story of Hamlet, the historical.
Hamlet. This is something that is brought into play when Hamlet becomes a story for the theater. Some people wonder if it was Shakespeare's invention. There's a playwright of Shakespeare's generation named Thomas Kyd. I think it's spelled K-Y-D, I think, or K-Y-D-E. And Thomas Kyd wrote, supposedly there was maybe an earlier version of Hamlet before Shakespeare, and many people think that this Thomas Kyd may have written that earlier version. But there's also, a play by Kyd called The Spanish Tragedy. And supposedly this Spanish tragedy has a lot of aspects in its plot that resemble many of the events in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And thus, and one of those plot points is the appearance of a ghost. So some people might say that perhaps Shakespeare brought in this ghost in his telling of Hamlet, being influenced by Kyd, maybe revising some of the plot of the Spanish tragedy of Kyd and integrating it into the Hamlet story. It's a very interesting theory. I have not read the Spanish tragedy, but that certainly is a good possibility. But it's a very exciting theatrical device. It allows there to be this great confrontation between the dead father, or at least the ghostly vision of the father, and the living son.
Banquo's ghost.
Oh yes, and the ghostly figures reappear in Macbeth, which is a few years later. So it's a very powerful theatrical device, and people still use ghostly figures in plays today. I don't think we necessarily believe in ghosts more than people did in 1600, but it's still very, very powerful as a theatrical image to see ghostly figures on the stage, especially in interaction with living figures. So Shakespeare probably was very smart to partake of this little bit of melodramatic, this flashy melodramatic device of the ghostly figure, and how that figure affects the living. That's among other things, Shakespeare is a great ghost story. So you mentioned revenge, the ghost enjoining Hamlet to effect his revenge, because the ghost is powerless to do so himself. So we could look at Shakespeare as a great revenge play, and yet it's a very strange revenge play, because by golly, if Hamlet had a different personality, if he'd gotten this information from the ghost, by the end of Act 1, by golly, by the end of Act 2, Claudius should be slain by that. Any other hero of a great revenge play would take care of this post haste. But Hamlet, he lets that hang. He lets that hang for another 4 long acts, and you wonder what kind of a revenge play is this when the protagonist seems to be taking his good old time to do it. Any of you want to expostulate on Hamlet as a revenge play? What is keeping Hamlet from doing the deed? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think he's just reluctant to do something so drastic and wants further proof that this is what he should do.
Okay.
And
So he doesn't completely trust the ghost. He thinks that this father figure might not be a reliable source, you think?
Or maybe he thinks it's really just in his imagination, really, and he's not quite sure. because he's so upset by the death itself and everything that's happened, the marriage of his
Okay.
mother to this other uncle.
Okay.
And then he spends half the time pretending he's really mad.
Yes, yes.
Not
I see
angry
Jim's
mad.
hand up. What do you have to say about this, Jim?
You know, didn't he have an inclination to commit suicide?
Okay. Yes.
That might
This
have
is definitely
been more
another
things.
aspect of his character. Yes, he meditates about this more than once in the play. I mean, this play you could consider one long meditation on death in various ways. So yes, that looms very large in this piece, and there's a few characters in the play who contemplate suicide. I mean, at the very end of the play, Horatio almost takes the poisoned cup in his hand and is about to do away with himself until Hamlet pleads with him not to. And Ophelia, I mean, she comes to a not so great end in Act 4. There's the notion of self-slaughter is a major subject in this piece. Gail, yes.
Well, I was just going to say, I saw in the way that this actor played it, I thought he played up the ambivalence in Hamlet more than, and I decided to look at, because, I wanted to see what some other actors had played the to be or not to be scene. I looked at Olivier's, is on film.
Yes.
And he really plays that scene as depression, and he actually has a knife that he sticks up to his chest a couple times, and then I looked at Richard Burton's, and his looked like an angrier Hamlet. So it's kind of interesting. I thought it was interesting to compare. I really like this actor, but I thought he wasn't as angry to me or as pressed. A little crazy at times, a little madness, which, I think is very interesting also, the madness aspect of it. And was he mad? Yeah.
Yes. So that's another question, is this madness feigned, or is he truly undergoing some great psychological disturbance? I don't know that it's an either or situation. Feigned madness can lead to real madness in a way. So yeah, and yes, these great meditations of Hamlet, they are prone and welcome many different approaches by these actors. So that's a very true thing. Betty, I think I saw your hand up.
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I think the very beginning, he's told to avenge his father's murder. His mother marries his uncle. I think his mind has got to be reeling. He's anguished. And the ghost tells him to avenge his father's murder. Now, if he seems like such a concentrated individual, that he's asking himself, if I do that, am I not the same? It's just, I see a lot of anguish and a lot of mental torment here.
So you could well say that if I avenge my father's death by killing my uncle Claudius, will that make me just as bad as
Am I just
as
bad?
Claudius? I'm simply replicating the same same psychopathy that Claudius was prone to, and the cycle just keeps on going. And when will it stop? You might think that might be one reason why he hesitates to do it, perhaps.
Well, I think there's a million things going through his mind.
Okay. And Jim again?
Essentially the effect of knowing that what his uncle did seemed to draw him toward thoughts of suicide. And you sort of answered the question there, that that there are some people that have I think it's probably genetically, they don't have the ability to kill. Other people have an easy ability to kill. I don't think Hamlet, the character Hamlet, had much of an ability to kill. And that's probably what drew him to start contemplating suicide, because he realized he could not avenge the death of his father.
Yeah. And, you know, Sarah Bernhardt played the role of Hamlet at the end of the 19th century. She was one of the first great actresses to play that role. And you know, and she was very much acclaimed for her interpretation of the part, but she really felt a great affinity for the character. And I think she was quoted as saying to the effect that I can only think of Hamlet as a woman, you know? And, you know, some people have viewed this role, and in fact, I think even Claudius says about Hamlet, you know, about his inability to quit from his mourning. You know, he's in his black mourning outfit, and he just doesn't seem to be able to get past his grief. And Claudius, at one point in this second scene, he let's see, where is it? Dear. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. So the king says to Hamlet, to persevere in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. 'Tis unmanly grief. You know, it's considered less than manly to be constantly, in a sense, of tearful, mourning. I was watching the Kenneth Branagh film of Hamlet from 1996, and I was observing the performance of the actor who played the role of Laertes, the son of Polonius. And that when he returns in Act 4, realizing that his father has been slain, he is just full of filial revenge, or feelings of revenge. He really wants to do away with whoever is at fault for killing his father. And you can see that he would not blink an eye before sticking the dagger into the culprit who is at fault. If Laertes was in Hamlet's position during Act 1, you know this would be a very short play. He would do the deed without a moment's hesitation, because Laertes is just built that way. That's his temperament. Hamlet is of a very different temperament, and he will not do this deadly deed until he is absolutely sure that it is the right thing morally, and it's the right thing metaphysically and temporally. Everything just has to be in place. Yes, Jim.
I'm not sure about that. I think his inability to kill his uncle also meant an inability to kill himself. And so he just prods along. And that's why the play takes 4 or 5 acts.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Along,
yes.
Not being able to kill, not being able to do anything about it.
I mean, so there just seems to be a difficult thing in getting on with things, particularly things of great import, great moment. It's easy to just be on the sidelines and let other people do the heavy lifting. You know, it's different. It's more difficult to really put yourself out there and do something that's really earth-shattering, really of great. It's going to change things. I think I find that same ambivalence in myself in many ways. I think that's why so many people can identify with Hamlet, because it is hard to be someone who takes the lead in making either a great social movement or a great change in one's life. It's not easy to take that, to say I'm taking responsibility for this, come what may. Yes.
He couldn't kill Claudius while he was at his prayers because that would be a mortal sin. Just as anyone who commits suicide, remarking about Ophelia, there was some doubt whether it was suicide or an accident. You can't be buried in hallowed ground because that's sinful to commit suicide, because God's work makes you a human being and you're defiling God if you kill someone at their prayers or die of a suicide.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting religious issues that this play brings up, like the ones you mentioned. I didn't even notice it before about this play, that this minister officiating at this ceremony really is rebelling against carrying out this requiem service, because he feels like it is almost heretical or sacrilegious to do it for someone who died in this manner. That really kind of surprised me. Another aspect that I've come across in my reading regards the ghost, Hamlet Senior. That he describes how he is kind of in this kind of nether world, not in hell, not in heaven, in a kind of a purgatory. He's kind of in this kind of anti room sphere, and this is very much a Catholic conception, purgatory, and according to what I've read, I don't know if this is true, in Shakespeare's time, the Church of England looked askance at this concept of purgatory. They felt that this was, a Catholic superstition, that members of the Church of England really were well done with, so Shakespeare is kind of playing with this notion of a purgatory-like state that this ghost is undergoing, and I'm sure that this scenes with the ghost probably had a very different resonance for viewers of Shakespeare's time, because to espouse publicly explicitly Roman Catholic doctrine at the time was dangerous. It was something that could be considered to be, against, the state religion. So, of course, having this play set in a time gone by, in an ancient medieval setting in Denmark, you could legitimately deal with those things. If this play was being done as a modern day story, that might be a different thing. So a lot of these concepts, theological concepts and moral concepts, very much are certain aspects of theology that Shakespeare is dealing with. But it's very even-handed the way he deals with these things in his plays. It really does not give us a firm sense that Shakespeare is Anglican or Catholic, what have you. You really can't pin him down in terms of his theology, I'd say.
Michael.
Yes.
So, yeah, you may want to remind people that that you can't see everybody. Jim's been raising his hand, and
I'm sorry, I can't see everybody at this.
It may help if people want to speak, just say a word or two, and then it will switch to them on your screen. So go ahead, I guess.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, to me? Okay.
Yes.
I have to wonder, in light of a suicide killing problem for Hamlet. I do have to wonder at the end of the play, in the sword fight, whether Hamlet had an inability to kill during the fight, and that's what got himself killed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's a really good question. Some of the writers I've been looking at suggest that in Act 5, Hamlet really is a very different person that he is in Act 1. Particularly this writer, Harold Bloom. This is a short little book he wrote called Hamlet, Poem Unlimited. That phrase taken from Polonius's speech about when the players are introduced in Act 2. He calls Hamlet an unlimited poem. And I think that there's some truth to that, because we're still talking about all the aspects of this poem all these years later. God, why did I bring this up? Oh, rats.
Oh, because he couldn't kill, was what Jim was saying? He thought he couldn't kill the Laertes? Was that?
Yeah, thank you.
No.
Yeah, he says in Act 5 that that Hamlet also almost has come to the point in Act 5 where he has kind of, in a sense, made peace. That he's gone past the point where he's actively seeking revenge, actively seeking to kill his uncle, and basically, he's made that statement to Horatio about the readiness is all. It doesn't matter if we die now or we die, in the future. As long as we are, feel like that when the time comes, we're ready. That we have sort of made our peace with our lives, and that come what may, that we'll be prepared for that eventuality that comes to us all. He's kind of made this kind of this peace with himself. That yeah, I mean, I might get killed by one of Claudius's underlings. I might be betrayed by one of my friends. I might be killed by a vengeful Laertes. And whatever happens, happens. Whatever happens, I'll be ready. Let be. Basically, he's become very, very, I don't know, Buddha-like, I'd say, in very many, in various ways in Act 5. He's quite, he's quite willing to walk into this little fencing match in the last scene, and not worrying about his fate. He says, "Oh, I'll probably get the better of Laertes in combat," and he realizes that, yeah, maybe they'll be setting a trap for me, but if it happens, it happens. He's much more, I think, willing to kind of go with the flow and not worry if he's going to be the ultimate victor. The character kind of changes in that final act. Very hard for an actor to bring that off, I think. And one of the great challenges of that role, to show that progression of mind and thought and feeling in that character. I think one of the things that brings us back to this play over and over and over again is this quality in Hamlet, and maybe a little bit in some of these other characters, but primarily in Hamlet, this quality that Bloom and other people talk about, inwardness, a sense of being able to get a sense of the consciousness, the thought process of the character. That it's not simply an outward show, something that's very extroverted, something that anyone can observe, without any analysis, but something that is, the deepest part of that person is somehow Shakespeare is able to let us explore who that person is in their heart of hearts, in their inner monologues, so to speak. I mean, we all have an inner life that no one else can sense but us. And you know, I think that's probably sometimes the most interesting part of ourselves, is that inner life that nobody else really gets a chance to hear and sense. And you know, almost for the first time in the history of theater, Shakespeare, in a play like Hamlet and a couple other great masterpieces from around this time and a little bit afterwards, he manages to develop this technique, this theatrical technique of allowing the theater goer, the listener, to hear this inner monologue of this lead character. And it's, you know, in this play, it's not just Hamlet. We also get a bit of that inner monologue by Claudius in one part of the play, the antagonist of Hamlet. We get a little bit of that in the middle of the play. So it's not just Hamlet, but it's primarily Hamlet in this play. And this continues on for some of the great, you know, tragic masterpieces that immediately follow. We get this definitely in Macbeth. We really get a sense of the soul of Macbeth in that play. We certainly do get it in the picture of King Lear in that play, and I think definitely in the terms of King Lear's arch nemesis Edmund, the son of oh God, I'm blanking out.
Gloucester.
Son of Gloucester in that play. You know, and Othello, I think, very much so. Not so much Coriolanus. Coriolanus does not have a whole lot of an inner life in that play. He's really more out. It's really more the outer man we see in that play. But you know, there are some of these. I'd say Cleopatra and Mark Antony and Cleopatra, which we'll be looking at in a couple weeks. That's another set of characters who you definitely get a sense of not just the outward show, but really the inner core of these people. This is something that Shakespeare starts to specialize in these great tragic masterworks, the sense of the interiority of these people. This is something that really playwrights really had not really gotten to. You know, maybe some of these playwrights of the ancient Greek ancient Greek tragic writers, but in terms of the modern theater, Shakespeare really is kind of mining this in a way that had been really unprecedented. Yes, Jim.
It would seem like in a play, normally for a playwright, it would be very, very difficult to pull off the inner dialogue and everything. And so, you know, Shakespeare must have really gotten a way to do it so that it maintains its interest for the viewer. But the inner dialogue is very common and has been very common for a long, long time in opera.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the use of aria in an opera is the, you know, musical theater equivalent of a Shakespeare soliloquy. We have the use of music and orchestration and you know, musical form to allow you know, a character to set themselves off from the, you know, general flow of the opera plot to, you know, give a personal confession to the audience in an aria. I'm sure there are arias that are more public, more songs that are directed specifically to characters, other characters on stage. But, you know, some of the most beloved of the opera aria repertoire are these kind of personal confessions that truly are, you know, just delivered from the, you know, character to the audience, not to any other characters on stage. And the soul is bared in those moments. And that's one of the reasons why people love opera so much. So I think that, and again, you know, the history of opera really begins circa 1600, which is about when Hamlet is composed. I would say that the course of opera probably would be very different, if playwrights like Shakespeare had never written. I think that his work did, I think, affect the opera field. I think not just in terms of operas written based on his stories, but in terms of just the general notion of what a character could convey in a dramatic form. I think that that's an aspect of Shakespeare's influence that I don't think has been fully studied, and that's a wonderful point you make. We don't have a whole lot of time. I think it would be worthy of our time to take a look at some of these arias that are in Shakespeare's play that I think give a sense of what these interior moments in the play, what they consist of, and how they affect the piece. So let me grab my little copy of this play here. Let's see. Let's take a look at.
Michael,
Yes.
While you're doing that, before you wrap up, maybe we could talk a little bit about the modern clothing that was used in the play.
Okay. So,
but
this,
do what you were going to do. We can finish up with that maybe later.
Okay. Actually, let's say that for a bit, but because I do want to get your opinions about the production. Let's just check on a few of these soliloquies. Again, most of them are Hamlets. Again, there is one key soliloquy for Claudius, his uncle. But there are about 7 of these soliloquy moments for Hamlet in which he is simply speaking alone. Harold Bloom calls it a character who is overhearing himself thinking, in a way. That notion of overhearing is a big part of this play. There are characters who are always overhearing others in the piece. Claudius and Polonius overhear, for example, Hamlet encounter Ophelia in the second act, for example. And there's always a feeling in this play of other ears overhearing things. And of course, there's the famous scene in which Polonius is hiding behind a curtain in Gertrude, Hamlet's mother's bedroom, her closet, as it's called in the play. And he is overhearing her confrontation with her son Hamlet, and Hamlet's confrontation with her. And there are always these little images of spies, people spying other people in the play. So it's, in a way, it's kind of interesting that Hamlet is so frequently, in a sense, overhearing himself, his own thoughts in the piece. So this is what Hamlet says at the end of the second scene in Act 1, after the Queen and Claudius have begged Hamlet to stay in the court of Elsinore in Denmark, not to go back to college in Wittenberg, and he agrees to do that. And he's kind of just stewing, in his foul mood, kind of just at odds with what he's going to do in this court, because he's still in this state of deep mourning and melancholy. And this is what he has to say, this first monologue. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it, fie. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed, things rank and gross in nature possess it merely, that it should come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion, to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth, must I remember? Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet, within a month, let me not think on it. Frailty, thy name is woman. A little month, or ere those shoes were old with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. Why, she, even she, oh God, a beast that wants discourse of reason would have mourned longer, married with mine uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing of her galled eyes, she married. Oh, most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. So, right at the beginning of the play, you really get a big insight into Hamlet's state of mind. I mean, you get a little sense of it in the exchanges he has with Gertrude and Claudius in the court scene, but now with this, you really get a sense of his tortured soul. And it is heartrending to hear that anguish. Now, of course, the famous monologue that everyone knows is, of course, that famous monologue about. Well, he references the notion of suicide, self-slaughter, in this first monologue, but then he really focuses on that in this fourth monologue, which occurs just before there is this play within the play in which Hamlet tries to catch the conscience of the king, King Claudius, to almost make him confess his crime of killing his father. And in a sense, he's still very that sense of ambivalence that was mentioned before. You really get a sense of that here. I mean, this is truly modern man. This is modern man that does not necessarily have the kind of unlimited faith that he may have had in medieval times, that there is more doubt in modern man. And Hamlet seems to exemplify that more modern personality in a monologue like this. Let's hear this piece. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of disprized love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would these fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death? The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. So this is not just a monologue about suicide. I mean, if it was only about suicide, it would be something that some people might take an interest in if they were of that melancholic frame of mind, or not. You know, if others, you know, aren't really concerned about that human phenomenon. But this is about, you know, are we willing to you know, take on all the joys and miseries and griefs and burdens of life, or do we just take the easy way out and kill ourselves and be done with all that misery? That is the modern dilemma, and Hamlet speaks for multitudes, for those who have been through so much suffering, so many problems, so many complications that life brings to them, that, boy, just to be able to sleep for a long time and not have to deal with all that, wouldn't that be heaven, to be able to do that? And yet, you know, what dreams may come. There's the rub, you know, what goes on in that undiscovered country. Yeah, there have ever been volumes that have been written, commentaries on this one soliloquy alone. Now, before we go on to our comments about this production, I just want to give you a different image of that fourth soliloquy of Hamlet, because that is not the only version of that soliloquy that exists. There is another version. This version comes from what is called the second quarto, which was the second publication of this play. And I think it's the second quarto that is the main source for the final published version in the first folio, the collected works of Shakespeare in 1623. But this, so the second quarto was published in 1604, and that, what you heard, is largely that second quarto. But the first quarto was published the year before, in 1603, and that quarto is called the bad quarto. It's not as reliable a source for Hamlet. It's about 1,000 lines shorter, I think, than the play that we know today, and there's some key moments that are very, very different from the Hamlet that we know. And one of the key elements that is different is this monologue. It comes in the play earlier in this version, and there's a lot of the phrases that are changed, a lot of the phrases that are put in a different place, and some of the phraseology is completely different. So it's similar, but it's not the same monologue. Let's hear this one. To be or not to be? Aye, there's the point. To die, to sleep. Is that all? Aye, all. No, to sleep, to dream. Aye, marry, there it goes. For in that dream of death, when we awake, and born before an everlasting judge, from whence no passenger ever returned, the undiscovered country, at whose sight the happy smile and the accursed damned, but for this, the joyful hope of this, who'd bear the scorns and flattery of the world, scorned by the right rich, the rich cursed of the poor, the widow being oppressed, the orphan wronged, the taste of hunger, or a tyrant's reign, and thousand more calamities besides, to grunt and sweat under this weary life, when that he may his full quietus make with a bare bodkin. Who would this endure, but for a hope of something after death, which puzzles the brain, and doth confound the sense, which makes us rather bear those evils we have, than fly to others that we know not of. Aye, that, oh, this conscience makes cowards of us all. Isn't that an interesting alternative version of this fourth soliloquy? There are theater groups who have actually performed this first quarto, and supposedly it's a pretty stage-worthy piece, but it's a different play. It's more purely, probably a more purely revenge tragedy than the Hamlet that we have. This Hamlet that we have is much more of the ambivalence than this first quarto, and I think that this version of the soliloquy, even though it has some of the ambivalence, not quite as much as in this second one, and it doesn't have as much of the great poetic phraseology as the second quarto's version, but it just goes to show that there is more than one source for this play. There's the first quarto from 1603, there's bad one, there's the good one, the second quarto from 1604, and then there's the first folio collected Shakespeare edition from 1623. And I would say that most productions, most modern editions, generally use a kind of a putting together of the best of the second quarto and the first folio. And occasionally there is the phrase, the odd phrase or two, that's only in the first folio. And hey, you don't want to lose a good phrase. So sometimes you find editors including little bits from that first folio as well. So every edition of Hamlet that you see published is going to be a slightly different than the other. There are always going to be different ways that the editors massage the script to provide the best possible version, whether for performance or for reading. And that again is part of this mystery of the play. Which Hamlet do you do? Everyone who does a production of Hamlet in this in our modern day is going to create their own performance version, their own set of sources in terms of the published versions, and their own cuts, because this is maybe the longest single play Shakespeare ever wrote. The unexpurgated text takes about 4 hours. So you can't just do the full thing generally, unless you just do it on maybe 2 different nights, I'd say. It's very rare. If you want to get the full Monty of the Shakespeare's Hamlet, check out Kenneth Branagh's film from 1996, because that really, that's the full piece, on 2 discs. If you want to overdose on Hamlet, that's the thing to do. But now we're dealing with the Stratford Festival's Hamlet. This version that was done maybe about 5 years ago. I think it was done the same year at Stratford as Love's Labour's Lost. Some of the same players are in this production of Hamlet as was in Love's Labour's Lost, and I think it's a very interesting piece. as was mentioned, this is being done in a more modern time setting than was done. It's not being done in Shakespearean era costumes. It's not being done in the Middle Ages. It's more the early 20th century. If I might, before we go open the floor to our discussion about the production, I just want to read what Anthony Cimolino, the director, has to say about this time they've set it in. So he says, our point of departure in this staging of Hamlet is the birth of the modern age, just before the start of the Great War in 1914. But since the story's relevance defies limitation to one era, time in our production is changeable and compressed, and the world begins to look more and more like our own. That's interesting. So just like Hamlet seems to age from Act 1 to Act 5, the time is slightly out of joint in this production as well. It starts out maybe slightly before 1914, but there are some elements that may seem to begin to look more modern as Act 5 rolls around in the production. And let me just read the last paragraph of this director's note. He says at the end, just as in Shakespeare's day, Galileo's discoveries in optics and Montaigne's skepticism would eventually end the feudal world of faith, so at the start of the 20th century, Freud, Einstein, and Picasso were to dissolve the certainties of the mechanical age. The old world would be swept aside, and with it, a generation of young people. But what would replace them? Would there be a fresh start? And in the face of death, does anything really matter? The rest is silence. So that's from Anthony Cimolino. So he set this early in the 20th century. So let's open the floor to discussion about this production, and we can speak about the setting, chronologically speaking, about the production, and anything else that will prove to be noteworthy in your mind. Let me just start from the people I see in my squares here. Jim, did you see this? And if so, what did you think?
I only saw part of it last night to the end of the play within the play, and then I decided it was time to go to sleep.
Okay, to sleep, perchance to dream.
To be or not to be, you know. Yeah, I found it interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
I was surprised
What?
because it's modern. I was surprised that they used a gun to kill Polonius. Linda and I saw Richard Burton kill Hugh Cronin behind a curtain in Toronto many years ago. Why not using a sword instead of?
And that was a modern dress too, yeah.
Yes. Very, very good point. Very good point. Well, I think some of these productions are influenced by other productions. And I saw a video of a Royal Shakespeare production featuring David Tennant as Hamlet and Patrick Stewart as Claudius. And that was set in a similar 20th century production scheme, maybe slightly later, maybe slightly before World War II. And in that production, the Hamlet played by David Tennant also shot Polonius through the arras, through the curtain in the closet scene featuring Gertrude. I have a feeling the people at Stratford must have seen that production. I would not be surprised because it was a very similar kind of staging. People steal things from previous productions of Hamlet, and I think that's something they may have stolen from that 2010 Royal Shakespeare film.
Michael?
Ruth, have you seen this production? And if so, did you have any thoughts on their treatment of this play?
Well, unfortunately, I only read as far as when he told Ophelia to get Heidi to a nunnery. So I didn't see, the end of it. But what fascinated me at some point after it dawned on me that they were a modern dress was the telephone that was on a desk. I mean, that's so foreign to us now, how far we've come in just that short period of time. I mean,
Yes.
they were very authentic and all the little details, weren't they?
Yes, I
You
mean,
know,
some of the properties. I mean, my mother noticed a singer sewing machine on
Oh,
stage
Right.
in the place where Ophelia was having her first scene with her
Uh-huh.
father. And
Yeah.
there was a music stand. Yeah. One of the things that struck me was that as Polonius starts his little dialogue with his daughter Ophelia, that she picks up her violin. She has a violin. She starts playing a little tune on her violin, and on the music stand there's a score from Verdi's La Traviata. I don't know why, but it's there, and it's another period detail. But Polonius starts singing a song using the melody that his daughter is playing. It turns out to be one of the songs that she sings later on in her mad scene. Today is St. Valentine's Day, I think it is. And it's a lovely way to see the music first used in a scene where Ophelia is in full capacity with her mental faculties, and then later on when she is distracted and disturbed in her mind. Most productions don't use the music in that way, and I thought that was an interesting thing
Michael,
for them to do.
I have something to say. Michael, it's Frank.
Yes.
Okay, so they had the modern dress.
Yes.
Obviously, they had some more modern guns, the long rifle, and then a pistol that looked like it was a Glock. Okay, which is really modern. But then they go into a duel using swords to solve their problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so they like reverted all the way back to the Middle Ages again.
Yeah. But I mean, people still do, fencing as a sport, today. I mean, I think it's an Olympic event. So, it was a little bit of a gentleman's bet in Act 5 that Claudius made that Hamlet could best Laertes. And it was not intended to be a mortal combat as it turned out to be. It was simply to show off Hamlet's prowess with the foil in comparison with Laertes. So it's a little more of a stretch, perhaps, yes, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. It was still a gentleman's sport in this time of maybe the First World War, even though people had graduated to other weapons in modern warfare. But yeah, it does seem maybe a little bit out of period. So it's hard, I think, to make everything consistent when you take something and put it into a modern period. So you could well say that doesn't completely work, but it's I can see your point. Anyways, who else has seen this play and would like to offer their thoughts on it?
This is Gail.
Yes.
Gail, I
Yes,
wanted
Gail,
to
yes.
just say what really, I watched the whole play, and what really struck me was the cross, particularly in the to be or not to be, in the soliloquy. It's right there, you know, and
yes.
I just wondered about it. What, is that his conscience, or, is representing his conscience? What, do you have some ideas about the cross that they?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a real good point. In other productions that I've seen recently, that scene in which he confronts Ophelia and they have this great falling out, and this great, it's where he really displays his madness fully to Ophelia, whether feigned or not. To have this done in church is really shocking to the audience, I think, because
Mm.
generally speaking, one tries to keep one's greater, passions sort of under wraps, because of the sacred space one is in. One does not want to create a great scene, but Hamlet, you have to admit, he does create a great scene. And there's something distinctly not sacred about the emotions being expressed in this moment. Yeah, there's more than one scene in this production that takes place in this chapel setting, and I think it does add a dynamic to the piece that is quite powerful, because you feel like that having to express these gut-wrenching emotions in a setting where one normally does not do that. That's something that's not in the liturgy, so to speak. It does verge on heresy. It does verge on being sacrilegious. So I think it adds that dynamic of near, being, not being irreligious. That I think does give the scene a power. I think it's true too of the scene where Claudius is, in a sense, giving his confession. He basically confesses to the murder, and in this scene that follows the mousetrap play within the play. And in this particular sequence, Claudius is actually, along with being at his prayers, at his kneeling down in this church, he's got a bottle of liquor, and it's like he cannot be completely honest with himself in his confession if he doesn't feel himself, giving himself some Dutch courage, as they say. And I think that, again, not only the fact that he has to, get himself, a little under the influence, but the fact, again, that he's in this sacred setting, talking about these deadly deeds he's done. Again, it's a very, it's a very unlikely setting for him to be doing this. So I think they used that setting in a very powerful way. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this matter or any other matters that you would like to bring up about this production?
I have one more thing, one last
Sure.
thing, and then I'll be quiet. I thought one of the things that stood out, I guess it was, I'm looking it up, but it was in Act 2 at the beginning when the actors were coming in to apparently audition for the play within the play.
Yes.
And Polonius went through the entire list of the types of plays that Hamlet has written, such as tragedy, history, comedy, that type of, and all the combinations too.
Yes.
So if anybody ever wondered what all the different combinations are, they can really go to that particular speech and get the whole list.
Yes. And by the way, if you're looking for any kind of autobiography in Shakespeare's works, I think you very well might say that in terms of his theatrical point of view, his theatrical philosophy, Shakespeare gives to Hamlet, I think, a lot of theatrical wisdom that I'm sure Shakespeare believed in, and it's in the Act 3, Scene 2, and it's a long passage, but it just starts out where he says to the players, "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines." And it's full of all these great bits, just like Polonius gives advice to his children. Here is Hamlet giving advice to these players. He gives it all kinds of notes to these actors, just like you can imagine Shakespeare giving notes to his colleagues in one of his productions. Again, he basically says that the main purpose of this whole thing this whole endeavor of doing theater, the big sticking point is to hold, as it were, the mirror up to nature and to show virtue, her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time is form and pressure. So to hold the mirror up to nature, what great theater advice that Hamlet gives to these players. I'm sure that comes straight from Shakespeare's heart as a theater professional. One thing that I'd like to say before we depart is the fact that there is a little double casting in this play that is rarely done, and I'm sure is very difficult to do. I don't know, did any of you notice an actor playing two key roles in this production?
No.
Okay.
Well, the
so,
same actor played Hamlet, Hamlet Senior, and his brother.
Okay. So
That
the
was
ghost.
one case.
So the ghost and Claudius.
Ghost.
Yes.
And Claudius, right?
And Claudius, yes.
Played by the same person.
So this was something. This was something I think that they stole from that Royal Shakespeare film from 2010, featuring David Tennant and Patrick Stewart as Claudius. So in that film, Patrick Stewart also plays Hamlet's father, the ghost, Hamlet Senior. And so you get this interesting dynamic that these two brothers were pretty well alike. There was a definite family resemblance between those two figures. Now, that's a film. That's a film of Hamlet. And a film is not filmed just straight through. You can film things in all kinds of different orders. And there's no problem by having the same actor playing those two parts in a film. But in a stage play, where things are being done in real time, and that you have to be sure that an actor has enough time to change from one character to another, it's not so easy to do. So this was a real technical challenge. How do you have the same actor, in this case, Geraint Wyn Davies, play the ghost in scene 1, and then be ready to play Claudius in scene 2? Not easy. So, and they talk about this in the actors roundtable for Hamlet. If you see that feature, that's one of the questions that they asked. How is this possible to do this? And this Geraint Wyn Davies says that they have a tremendous backstage staff at the Stratford Festival, and they really did make it possible for this to happen. But he said that he just had to be Johnny on the spot. Once he got into the costume for the next character in the next scene, he had to immediately go and be on stage. There was
Michael,
no wiggle room. Yes.
Michael, you may have noticed, though, that as he was coming onto stage in that next scene, he was still putting his jacket on.
Oh my God! Oh my God! I did not notice that.
Yes,
Well,
he actually put his jacket on stage. Yeah,
that was probably of necessity, I would say. Yeah, there are a couple of really, really quick changes for him, and he said in the little round table that if I were doing this piece today, I would do it differently. I would not have them look differently. I wouldn't put on a fake beard for the ghost. I would be clean shaven like Claudius's was. It would help with the changes for one. But I think he wanted to make it clear that it was not the look of the characters that made them different. It was something else entirely that gave these characters a different aspect. So he's looking at this film in a way that says, no, you don't need to do all those makeup changes to make these two characters distinct. So that's an interesting point of view. But I thought that was an outstanding feature of this production, the fact that this actor was able to do that double role and make it convincing, make those two very distinct personalities. I also thought that the actress who played Ophelia, Adrienne Gould, was truly outstanding. I mean, her progress, or her declension throughout the play, from being a lovely sweet girl to someone who is truly in the grip of a great mental madness and disturbance, was truly astonishing. And she truly played her madness and her grief over the loss of her father in the most take no prisoners way. You truly felt her not at all holding back in her grief. That was a tremendous performance as well. And this key scene between Hamlet and his mother, played by, in this case, Shauna McKenna, that really is the key, central scene in the play. This confrontation between son and mother. That's actually the scene that's most faithful to the original historical text. This conflict that Hamlet has with his mother in the history is very much taken by Shakespeare in this play, and you really feel like that there's these actors have got to be completely exhausted by the end of that scene. That seems like that this dressing down of his mother by Hamlet will never end. This mother-son romance this is going to eat them up alive. That's the supreme test for these actors, to get through that scene. I think they did a wonderful, wonderful job of maintaining their balance, and yet giving their full passions reign in that piece. I think that I was not disturbed by the change of scene in terms of the chronology. I don't think it really hurt the play overly much. I think this poem Unlimited that Harold Bloom talks about, I think it can take a lot of different versions. Every version of this play, every production is going to be different. It's going to be set in any number of different eras. And all I can say is no production can completely contain the play. No production can completely contain this character. That this truly is a poem unlimited, and every generation is going to find different ways of putting it on. And because we have to end, all I can say is the rest is silence. We'll have to put this on hold. We'll take a breather for next week, and when we come back, we'll take a look at another disturbed personality, namely the title character of Shakespeare's history, King John. Oh, 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mother. Anyways, but for now, the rest is silence. Thanks for attending this week.
Thank
Go
you,
out and vote
Michael.
next week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Fond farewell. Parting is such sweet sorrow. So until then, thanks again for your attendance and your
Okay,
interest.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.